flag, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Notice of this meeting was provided with the Westfield Leader, the Star Ledger, and properly posted on the municipal bulletin board and filed in the office of the municipal clerk, informing the public and town and place according to the provisions of Open Public Meeting Law, Chapter 231, PL 1975. Everyone, please, if possible, turn off your cell phone. I'll put them on vibrate. Very appreciate it. Ms. Ariema, roll call.
Mayor Lombardo.
Here.
Councilman Kukrow. Here. Councilman Martin.
Here.
Councilman Matthew.
Here.
Councilman Sarno.
Here.
Councilman Tedesco. Here. Council President Petrozelli.
Here.
This evening, we're here to discuss the proposed 2016 municipal budget. At this time, I'll turn the meeting over to our Chairwoman, Councilwoman Tedesco.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
So, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome the Mayor, my fellow council people, and the residents to the first presentation of the 2016 municipal budget. Here tonight, we have our Borough Administrator Clerk, Ms. Ariema, our CFO and Tax Collector, Ms. Sandy Bruns. We have our auditors, Warren Brecky and Bill Swisher. So I would like to start out by thanking the other members of my committee, Councilman Sarno and Councilman Petrozelli, as well as our professional staff of the Borough, Administrator, CFO, and auditors for the time they put into this budget at our meetings and for taking my phone calls. Thank you. Our next budget meeting will be a week from tonight at 7 p.m. here in Council Chambers, and I welcome the residents to attend that session as well. The tax assessor will also make a presentation that night on the issue of reevaluation. Since we decided to keep the process of having two special budget meetings like we did last year, I would like tonight's meeting to focus on the operating budgets of the borough, and we will move through it page by page. Next Thursday, in addition to discussing the operating budgets, I would like us to discuss capital requests that were made by the various departments. I have now had the honor of serving as finance chair 4 times under 2 different mayors. Each year, the committee and the council face challenges, and this year is no different. Our goal should be to provide the residents of Garwood with the best possible services at the best possible price, and this is mainly done through the budget process. I again would like to thank Councilman Petrozelli and Sarno, as we've had many discussions and made many unanimous decisions as we went through the budget line by line. However, we did not always agree on every decision, but we stayed focused on the task at hand and continue to move from item to item. It is more than acceptable to respectfully disagree. I ask this council to voice their questions, suggestions, and opinions as we go through the budget. I certainly do not expect us to agree on everything, and that is okay. However, for the sake of the process and time, we should be able to discuss various items, voice vote, and move on to the next matter before us. Some of the discussion may involve staff salaries or staffing levels, and I ask that the council be mindful in the conversation tonight to not mention any employee by name. We should be using job titles or positions instead. After that prelude, I really wish I could be the bearer of better news here tonight. Although we saved substantial money in many areas over last year's budget, including $44,000 in streets and roads salaries and wages, $16,500 in shade tree, $23,000 in gas, $4,000 in tax collector salaries and wages, and $27,530 in debt payments. We faced many large increases. Also, on the revenue side of the budget, we were able to anticipate $35,000 for senior housing, that development in between 2nd and 3rd Avenues. The increases this year, some of the larger ones here, include $44,000 in legal, $38,000 in planning board, which also includes the Fair Housing or COA plan, $30,000 in tax appeals, $54,000 in Rahway Valley Sewage Authority, and $55,000 in the police and fire retirement systems. Also, although we did anticipate that revenues were before that looking a little bit bleaker than last year. So with all that said, I did just receive word this afternoon that the tax impact is looking at $185 per household. So we certainly have our work cut out for us going forward. We are currently over the tax levy cap by $16,335. I expect us to cut spending and increase revenues by well over that amount, but by law, we do need to reduce appropriations or increase revenues by at least that amount. And this also puts the issue of the cap bank ordinance on the table, and I will ask the auditors to speak to that first tonight. And now I will turn the meeting over to the auditors to briefly explain this cap bank ordinance that has come before the Garwood Council year after year, and then I will lead the council in moving through the budget page by page. Thank you. So Warren and Bill, if you wouldn't mind just addressing the cap bank ordinance briefly.
Every budget year, you're under two different caps. One's the tax levy cap and one's the spending cap. It's called the 1977 cap, that's when it originated. That cap is a limitation on the amount you can appropriate in the 2016 budget. This year, since inflation is very, very low, the actual percentage increase you can go up is zero. I mean, there is no increase. The only way you can increase the appropriation side is by what they call the cap index rate ordinance, or the COLA ordinance, to 3.5. That's the way the law reads. It's either the inflation rate, which is zero, or it's the COLA ordinance by 3.5. Okay? If you decide to go to the 3.5%, it just increases the spending limitation on the appropriation side, because there's some appropriations inside the cap, there's some outside the cap. This would give you the ability to increase your budget for spending purposes only. Whatever you don't use is banked for the next 2 years. So what the ordinance we've usually traditionally have done here is we went to the 3.5. We really didn't use it all because on the spending side, we're under the spending side for appropriation purposes, even without the 3.5. We give us the banking ability for the next 2 years, if and so, in fact, to do other increases. But that's entirely up to the council to do that.
Right, and just to clarify, so this is not banking physical money, it's just
No,
allowing...
it's just capacity, spending capacity in the future.
Okay, thank you. And it doesn't mean that the council needs to use all of it moving forward?
You're actually under the spending cap. You're over the tax levy cap, but you're under the spending cap this year.
So any questions
So
on
it's
that?
for banking purposes only.
Any questions on the cap bank ordinance at this point from the council? And it's just something that we should think about moving forward. If you think of questions between now and next week, that would be a good time to ask. All right, so let's start going through this budget. It is 42 pages, but some will take much less time than others, so let's get started. The first one is administrative and executive. As you can see here on our budget sheets, we have the amount that was requested and the amount approved by the committee at this point. So you can see that the committee has shaved in some areas here on this budget. And does the council have any questions, suggestions, concerns on this first page?
I have a question.
Sure.
The newsletter,
Mm-hmm.
there isn't any newsletter right now currently. Is there?
We've had some issues with that. It's run into a bunch of snags from the last publication, but we are trying to bring it back again in a couple of months. But there's another avenue that our business administrator has been looking into, and myself, I personally spoke to the owners of that newspaper, and we are currently in the next group of 6. They have 18 out right now. And also, too, I reached out to Dr. Quigley, who can support us with more news if need be in that newspaper.
I saw that publication, that's really
Yes.
a good idea. It's no cost to the taxpayers.
That's correct.
So it's really good going forward. So
Yeah,
then,
Mhm.
if you're allocating 3,000 for that, then would that not be removed or?
I would suggest cutting in half, give us some leeway for publication.
Right, right now it is at 2,250, so it would be for 3 publications per year. But if
I just got a question, forgive me, I mean, it's the first time hearing it, I'm glad you brought it up, I forgot about it. What are the issues that came up with the newsletter?
Getting reports put together and putting them into a document, getting to the purpose, multiple succession of problems.
And when did this arise?
I'd say the end of the year, we were planning to put something out earlier this year, but just didn't work out. That's why I went forward with this administrator, went forward with others. Newspapers are monthly, but it's strictly for Garwood because they don't allow 2 communities to work together on one paper. And as I mentioned before, I spoke to Dr. Greenwood, she's willing to assist us with news of the school.
And just so you know, for a little historical purposes, when we brought back the newsletter, I couldn't get a straight answer on why it was brought back as 4 publications a year. We had never done that in the past. We had done 1 or 2. So I think that might be part of the problem. Again, it was, I think basically it was just arbitrarily decided at 4, and no one ever really went back and looked at the history of it. So Garwood never had something that was a quarterly publication from the borough. So again, maybe that was kind of part of the reason.
And also, because the councilwoman said, this is a monthly paper, and the local towns or the surrounding towns can advertise right in here, so it's a big plus for Guava, I hope we bring it forward. And like I said, I did speak to them already.
So it was one, like I said, it was wonderful. It was like a little version of the leader. You know, you can advertise, you can do everything. It's like,
Yeah. One is called the Mountainside.
yeah, the one I saw was
Right.
from Mountainside, but you know, Garwood, it's really good. So then, if that's gonna be that, then why couldn't we just wipe out the whole 2250?
Because I'm gonna hopefully have a publication before the summer.
And the independent paper that you're referring to has not yet included Garwood, and they're waiting for their next grouping of 6, so we really don't know when that will happen. But from what I hear, I think we could probably cut this even further, so instead of 2250, how about 1500? Would the council agree?
How about 500?
Okay.
Okay.
So let's see. So we had 1500 on the table. I'll kind of make that motion. Anybody want a second 1500?
I'm okay with 1,500.
Okay.
Yeah,
It-
cut it down.
the-
We really don't know when this other paper is actually going to come online, so we could possibly have 2 of them, you know, that would be done, you know, the way we used to do it.
Right.
So at least that would cover us.
And I just got a procedural question. This is kind of strange. Again, forgive me, this is my 6th rodeo. So we're going to have votes on each sub-line item?
No, but as they come up, we should probably see where the
At least
council
this
stands.
And this is a binding straw
No.
poll? So it's not a binding, so yeah.
Well, that was towards the overall budget.
I'm just confused.
Well, what does it mean? Because this is my first rodeo, so
Yeah.
I'd like to understand if like, you know, are you trying to go through every single item and then, so it's not binding, is that what you're saying? I don't understand.
No, of course not. We are having another budget meeting next week. So if between now and next week, there's a change of opinion, that should be shared by next week though, so that we can introduce the budget as planned on March 22nd.
All right, then another quick question. How many, even if the new newspaper is not put out for like a few months, is there plans for the other newsletter to come out that we're gonna put this?
Yes, that's why I've asked to have $1,000 left there. We can talk about that.
So, can we just have like a quick show of hands who would be okay with 1,500? I mean, because if procedurally, this is my first time kind of going through it this way, but procedurally, if everyone up here wanted it down to 0, then we should move it down to 0 tonight. Right?
Oh, okay.
So that's,
Okay.
that's all I'm kind of looking for.
I
It's
think-
just everybody's
I think we should
sentiments.
maintain something
500?
The mayor's got a good plan, he's saying 1,000, right? You have something in mind, right?
there. Yeah, I do have something in mind, and we can talk further about it.
All right, well, I think that the issue is the cost of each issue. You know, when the town does it, it does cost $750 per. So that's where you come up with $1,500.
Okay. I'll bend a
Okay,
little bit.
all right, let's have that at 1,500 then, based on this conversation. We can revisit it next time. The next page is mayor and council. Any questions? It's 750 reduction from that. If nothing, we'll move on municipal clerk. So now we're on page 3, municipal clerk.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm sorry, you have to forgive me here.
No apology necessary.
On page 2, okay, it says other expenses. I noticed that throughout a lot of the budget. I mean, is this broken down somewhere where the other expenses are, so I know what they are?
They are recorded, what is spent in other expenses. So a report could be printed, so you could see every other expense for 2015. The Finance Committee did look at many other expense categories to see what was being spent. Specifically with mayor and council, it's training that we've attended, seminars and so forth.
Okay, all right, so then, and also, that was also about the stipend. We were removed from that, right? So this is not in here?
There
Is that
are-
the one, page 2?
Correct.
Okay.
The stipend would be under salary and wage, top section. The bottom section, other expenses, is where you would charge if you attended some kind of class.
Okay, yeah, I mean, if they break this all down itemized, I mean, that would be good, because otherwise, then a lot of stuff could just be miscellaneous. Like I said, I'm just trying to understand the procedure.
But believe other budgets will be more broken down. Mayor and council's a pretty simple one. You'll see on the more complex budgets,
Yeah,
it's
I saw
broken
it.
much further.
Yeah,
And
I'm
then
just
other
using that-
expenses is just one line out of maybe 10 or 15.
Yeah, I'm just using
compared
that as
to
an
two.
example, because I flitted through and there was a lot of that. you
Sure.
know, Other expenses, so I have to grab it where I have it in my
Okay.
lap, so I don't forget
Well,
going forward.
I hope I clarified then.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Actually, that conflicts with my understanding of the budget. Let me just tell you what my understanding of it is, and feel free. In New Jersey, in the municipal budget process, basically you have two main categories, salaries and wages and other expenses. So basically, and particularly when you go through it the first time, you see everything as other expenses, and right away you equate that with miscellaneous. But basically, that's the legal budgetary categories that things are divided up into. Now, is it appropriate to go ahead and to drill down and find out what the OE is? Absolutely it is. But for budgetary, statutory purposes, it's really salaries and wages, S&W, or other expenses, OE. So everything that's not a salary or wage is other expenses. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, thank you.
But I just want to clarify that too, because of the budget sheets in front of you. The budget sheets presented to the council in years past, I want to say significant number of years ago, used to literally just say salaries and wage and other expenses. What you have before you is a list of salaries and wages, then other line items, which would fall under that other expense category that the councilman's talking about. And then within that larger umbrella of other expenses, you have the one line that says other expenses, which is more of the miscellaneous type of other expense, so.
Okay.
All right, okay, so anything on the clerk's page?
Yeah.
Any questions? Okay.
Oh, yeah, a question on the clerk's page. There was a separate sheet I got about raises. So there's, what's reflected in here, are any raises assumed in any of these line items?
No, they're not, they are in the salary adjustment page,
Okay, so-
as they were in the previous years.
So everything is $0 from the previous year unless and until it's changed?
Correct. Okay. The next page here is financial administration treasurer. Anything on this? The finance committee did shave this budget down by $500. Next would be the financial administration page audit, which is a set amount given to us by our auditors that were appointed at reorganization.
No, they were appointed a month before. Correct?
Seems expensive. Just kidding.
It's a real lot of money.
Okay, no comment from the auditors on that one. Next, we have computerized data processing. This was a category that in previous years, prior to 2015, used to be in every budget. And then last year, to make it more transparent, all the copy machine and any other computer data processing as listed out here, website hosting, etc., has now been separated out. So we do have a bit of an increase over last year, but that's basically where we are with our software contracts. Okay, next, tax collection. So this is where we do have a savings on our current tax collector position over the previous year by $4,000 that I mentioned earlier. We did shave some of the other expenses budget as a finance committee. Anything here?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of the S&W here.
What's that?
I'm not in favor of the S&W here because this includes tax collector and it assumes a full-time role
Okay.
on top of that.
And the tax collector's salary
Is in there.
is in this 52?
Yes.
Even though it goes to a person who's in another line item?
Right, like right now, that person is part-time and is around 23. Right now, it's assumed that it's 35.
And to clarify.
I don't really understand, I don't
Sure.
understand how this all worked, how this all came from.
Sure.
And this spanned the election and also spanned the 2 fiscal years. So I'm having a hard time.
Because that was the first one, that's the one that was hired part-time, right, that took over for?
Sure. Let's, for the benefit of the public too, go through a little backstory as to how the budget has come before us. So this is for 2 positions, the certified tax collector at $17,000, and also the currently part-time tax clerk, and this amount of money, $52,000, would be for that part-time tax clerk to either become full-time or for there to be 2 part-time employees in that office, as we've discussed in other sessions as a council. The Finance Committee was 2-to-1 on this, and that's why the budget looks the way it does here. But as Councilman Sarno points out, he is in dissent on that. So I don't know if anybody wants to address it from the administration side now, or if we just want to hear sentiments of the other council people. But right now, the Finance Committee was just 2-to-1 on this.
So, all right then, so then, in other words, are you saying that the part-time position is now going to full-time?
It
Or
could,
they can hire 2 part-time.
But
It allows
he
leeway for
was just
either.
hired as part-time, correct?
right, there was a retirement in November.
Right.
So there was a temporary situation put in place, which, based on the workload, our administrator has recommended that in order to get all the work done in that office properly, it should be either 1 full-time tax clerk or 2 part-time employees, 1 for the tax side, tax clerk side, and 1 for the payroll side.
But there's nothing saying we have to do that because that jacks up the budget as well. So it can't stay the way it is as a part-time person.
Can you speak to it at all?
Yeah, I'd like to, actually. We had been anticipating a retirement in the tax department as an opportunity to finally address the needs of the finance department and to better maximize efficiency there. We're not asking for additional staff. We just want to maintain the existing staffing level. We would like to either replace what was previously a full-time position with another full-time person, or at least have 2 part-timers. Again, it's not asking for additional staff, it's just maintaining what was there prior to the retirement. The finance department needs qualified individuals with a skill set who will be able to assist with the ever-increasing workload that's been placed on that department by federal and state mandates. We'd like to reallocate the duties to better utilize the existing staff and provide for proper segregation of duties. Right now, all the responsibility and knowledge of all the borough's finances rests with 1 individual. And I don't see that that's good business practice, and I feel that you're putting the borough at risk. I can give you comparisons of what other towns have if you're interested as far as staffing. But I really feel strongly that we need to at least maintain the level that was there previously. The
Sandy?
finance department shares an office.
Just got one question.
If you could just let her finish.
Okay, just got one question.
The finance department shares the office with the municipal clerk, and we're also called upon to assist in that department. The finance and clerk departments are the main source of information for the residents of Garwood. We handle a large portion of the borough's business. So I really think you need to consider all that when you're making a decision regarding the staffing of that department.
Well, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but from what I'm hearing this evening, I mean, I'm thinking about the people. We're talking about a huge increase.
It's not an increase.
I'm talking about in overall taxes, which are taxes, and that's without the school, and that's without county. I mean, we could be having a tax impact of $600 a home per 100,000 assessment. Ooh. So I'm thinking anything that can be cut from the budget in this time of need really will have to be addressed, I believe.
Councilman, you had a question?
Sure, Sandy, I just got a question for you. You said, I hear you on the manpower, person power, I don't want to be politically incorrect. Do you have a strong preference as to whether it's 2 part-time individuals or 1 full-time?
I actually have mixed feelings on both. The part-timer that's there now is excellent. He is an asset. He's capable of taking on more work if he was there full-time. But I understand the implications of hiring a full-timer. I just need help, and whichever way you see fit to give it to me, I'll be satisfied with. So, I'll
Okay.
leave it up to you.
So it seems either or would satisfy the
Yeah.
power of the finance?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Because just
want
one,
to know if
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Bill and Warren could even speak to segregation of duties. I know that's something that, from an audit perspective, I think we recommend. I think you guys know that everything falls on me, and I don't know if you would have an opinion on that one way or another to kind of confirm what I'm saying. I don't know.
I understand, it's just, the office is small, but if you need help, you need help. Can't do it yourself.
And then also too is, either way, you go either way, you have to have it in the budget now. You just can't pull it aside for the year, it must be appropriate for it. Is that correct?
It's got to be in the budget.
Right.
And just one parenthetical comment I want to make, and if your head's not spinning already, it will continue to spin, just to make sure that you're having apples to apples comparison in your mind. You go ahead and hire 2 part-times, the cost indeed will be $35,000. You hire 1 full-time, the cost will be in this line item, $35,000. It will then bump up the health care,
Right.
and it will then bump up the pension, and it will bump up the Social Security and Medicare. So remember, 2 full-time, you get into this weird kind of Obamacare thing of FTEs, full-time equivalents. So 2 part-times don't equal a full-time. A full-time is significantly more than 2
Oh, I know,
part-times. And I'm not saying which way to go on this, but just so when you're making that decision, that's.
Well, I know what the ramifications are full-time. I mean, it's not always a salary that gets you, it's the benefits, pension, it's like everything going down the line.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's move on. The next page is assessment of taxes. So this is where we have the tax assessor and related other expenses. So, anything on this page?
This hasn't gone up at all because of tax appeals?
That's elsewhere in the budget. We'll get to that.
So assessment, so
Correct.
it won't be reflected in this particular line.
Yeah, there's a separate line.
Separate item for taxes. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Legal services is the next page, and this is where we see a very significant increase. We're not happy about this increase, but at the same point, this is what was advised of the Finance Committee to budget, and so that's what you see before you now.
Sarah, I'd like clarification on that. Just, like I said, just bear with me. I apologize.
No need to apologize.
We're going from, we're doubling this, okay, for legal fees. Now, I understand a lot of it was impact from tax appeals. Do we have a breakdown of how much money was actually saved in these tax appeals versus how much money has been charged as fees? Because, all these tax appeals, these are all the commercial properties, am I correct?
Correct.
Right.
But there's also residential tax appeals. But, Sandy, do you have anything on
I'm not
that?
sure what you mean by saved on tax.
Well, basically, the attorney had to represent us while they were doing the tax appeals, correct? So there's X amount of dollars based on the assessment and the ratios of how much they were looking for. So we're charged $85,000 for tax appeals, legal end of it, right?
Well, no, that's not all tax appeals, that's all the legal fees for the.
All right, so, is there a breakdown of the amount of people that did tax appeals and how much was saved by the attorney based on attorney fees?
I don't have an analysis of that. Maybe the assessor could determine
Yeah,
that.
I think,
real quick, I think that's one of the questions or concerns I brought up throughout the committee process. I said, would an assessment, and that's going to be brought up next week.
Next week, right.
And when the Switzer comes in and makes a presentation.
There's-
Okay.
No, if somebody is successful with a tax appeal, they're getting a refund from us.
correct.
But what I
there's
believe the
not
councilwoman is saying is, if, basically what we say by Bob, spend the money.
You're exact, what, for a tax appeal. I mean, I've done that. I've done that for people, so.
Yes, we still had to refund that. I mean, what he settled his appeals, and we had to pay out about 60,000 in
Right.
between refunds and credits, so.
But could they have been settled without the legal fees?
I don't,
No.
I mean, that's an assessor's question, not me, I don't have
Great
to
question.
do
I
that.
think your first question is just more pertinent.
Well, because I only say this honestly, because I've done them. So it's a matter of if somebody, you know, it's based on the assessment and based on other comparables and stuff like that, right? So if an attorney, if you get an attorney to represent you, and I've seen people have attorneys represent them, they charge, you know, a certain percentage based on how much money they're saving that person, okay? So do we know what the people were looking for in comparison to what Mr. Renaud charged as per his fees and what was saved? In other words, would it have been the same amount of money saved without
Those are
legalities
questions
being brought into it?
You would have to ask
Am I
the
explaining
assessor
correctly
that.
now?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a great question and one to be asked next week to the tax assessor, so
Okay, that's,
definitely hold on to that question.
that's going over there big red.
The final bill from the attorney last year was 86,000, so that's why you see the budget this year at 85,000, so definitely not cheap, but
I got a question on that, and if I could,
Sure.
if I could just remind my colleagues up here just to speak into the mic, because it's hard to hear for some people out there. So Sandy, when I asked you about this before, the increases were primarily due to the tax appeals, right?
The legal.
Yeah, increase in legal fees.
Yeah, I think about 35,000 of it was Mr. Renaud's defending appeals.
35,000 of what? How much of it?
85, is for the ADAP. About 35 of the 85 legal fees was for his appeals.
Okay, and does that, okay, the 35 to 85, and that doesn't include the 15,000 he gets for coming to the council meetings. That's exclusive of that, so, of that, and then, okay. So it's fair to say that most of that increase was then due to tax appeals. Okay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they settled a couple of tax court appeals. We always have county appeals every year. I think there was, I don't know, 15 or 20 of them last year, but the tax court appeals, I think, require a lot more work.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, I know I've spoken with Councilwoman Cooper about this before, and not that I'm defending attorneys charging fees,
Yeah,
but
let's hope not.
maybe, yeah. It's hard to quantify something when you say something's quote unquote successful. It's a lot of it's in the eye of the beholder. I sue you for $2 million and the attorney settles it for $100,000. Is that a successful settlement? Well, when you have $2 million looking you down down the throat, you can make the argument it is. So I think you asked a very, very intriguing question. The thing that and I would love to know the answer to that. I find it to be, it's hard to quantify. And also my understanding, you were talking about this far better than me, I think.
I think they can be quantified. Like I said, I've done it personally, and I've had people have attorneys do it.
But if I file one, right, say if I go and file one on my home, don't I get offered it's like challenging a parking ticket. Don't I get offered a settlement? If I don't take the settlement, then I can proceed with my case?
Basically what happens is if you can come up with the comparables to justify that your taxes are indeed, it's overassessed, your property's overassessed, there really don't negotiate that much,
But I thought you filed the appeal, and again, I liken it to when you're in New York, at least when you were challenged a parking ticket, you would file the challenge, you'd say it was $75, they would say, here, pay $35. And if you went ahead and challenged that, you then, I'm sorry, Council President, okay? But I'm just trying to find, I'm sorry if you're in a hurry, if you can leave, that's just not the question. But what I'm trying to find out, if you have some time. But I'm sorry if I'm taking up too much time. But what I'm saying is, I'm sorry, Councilwoman. I'm sorry, former Councilwoman. But what I'm saying is, my understanding is when you file the tax appeal, you get an offer of a settlement.
No, not all the time.
Okay, that was my question. And I'm sorry if you have other places to be.
Well, I'm sorry, I think we're up here trying to understand everything that is going to impact everybody.
Page 10, please.
Okay.
And just
Next.
to clarify, I don't have anywhere to be, but there's 42 pages here, and this is going to be addressed the next time by the professionals.
The next page is engineering services, which is the same as last year. Moving on from that is the planning board page. This is one which the Finance Committee did shave in a couple areas. We originally took down the other expenses from 6,000 to 3,000, the education from 2,000 to 1,000, the advertising from 1,000 to 500. Then the redevelopment, there's 15,000 for South Side and 15,000 for North Side, and that was one where the Finance Committee was mixed. So we definitely wanted to have a discussion with the council at large about how the council felt about how much to fund for redevelopment. So,
I have a question on this one too. As a member of the planning board, I got a letter that we got a $25,000 check from a developer. Does that ding this line item?
I just heard the same today, and
Okay.
I mean,
And are there,
I'd be open to it if that's certainly the case.
no,
You know,
it's either, it either is or it isn't. And that's the question, and then do other of these items come from escrows? That's the question I have. Because do we have to then go through this thing of authorizing a disbursement, and then on the back end it gets, because that would obviously make a big difference to me at least, in how I would vote on these. But yeah, just to tell you, I thought you were aware, I'm sorry, we did get a $25,000 check from the developer.
Okay, very good, very good. So with that said, we can either try to take that line item down now, or we can come back to it next week after getting more clarification, if we want to reach out to the planning board chair, or if it's mentioned.
I think it's a question,
Right.
I think it's gone up drastically. I think it's gone up.
Okay.
I don't believe the borough should be funding this at all. I really don't. I mean, this is something if a developer wants to come in, if they're really interested in being in Garwood and the great community that we are, you don't have to set aside fees that you could get maybe reimbursed later. I don't even want to go down that road. We shouldn't even be there to begin with. I understand the logic, I just disagree with it.
I would take it down to zero almost if we could. I'd take them all down.
Well, and that's why we discuss it, because if the whole council, or if 4 members of the council want it to be 0, then that's really what we should do, you know what I mean? So, but, okay, I'll,
What does that pay for, those redevelopment?
The studies, the redevelopment and surveys and studies.
Okay, so we're saying that we would want developers to do the studies.
so, with this said, I would like to reach out to the planning board, get their sentiments, and then, since this is a recent development, and then we'll discuss it next week, okay?
And Mike, just on your point, they generally do. They generally do pay those. That, my question is just, is that the case in this instance? And to what, and if so, to what extent?
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the planning board page? No. Moving on, we have the insurance page, and this is calculated out by our finance department, so.
Yeah, where were the big increases on this now?
Well, go ahead, Mayor, sure.
The first insurance general was 5205, work comp was 4286, employee group insurance was 9,000, and unemployment insurance was flat. That's what it means.
I mean, generally, this is a fairly flat budget, but the healthcare, correct me if I'm wrong, it's about 14% it did go up.
I believe it was 5 points.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why I wrote 14 on here. Oh, yes, you're right. 5.8 in 2016. Looking at the wrong note. Sorry. 5.8.
5.8 once you take into account the employees' copay.
No, that's what the state said the increase in the premium was, 5.8.
So it's 5.8, which is not bad. And then that doesn't take into account.
The increase in, I mean, everybody is now at the tier 4.
That would matter. Okay.
I do have one mention. Under insurance, the other insurance line, we are going to, the one that's at 142, 180, needs to be reduced 1,700. That was the bond.
So there's the rebate we got. Is that the rebate?
No, the insurance broker just sent me an email that we don't have to do individual bonding anymore, that we'll all be covered under the blanket bond. So we paid about $700 a year for those individual bonds. And now they're included as regular premium under the blanket bond. There must have been some change in the law that I'm not aware of that made it so we don't have to get individual bonds anymore, and that's why, and we just found that out the other day, so I told them to take the 1,700 out.
Because they used to affect you, right, Tina? You had to do.
We all had individual bonds, and when they go to renew, they're not being renewed, they're just being covered under blanket bond.
Okay, thank you. So we can adjust that? Thank you. All right, next we have the police budget. All right. Any questions on the police budget? Or suggestions, concerns? Okay. Seeing none.
That'd be quick.
Oh.
I don't know if we're done. Yeah. You looking through that, or?
Well, I'm speechless, but I think, you know, I'm just.
Salaries and wages are per union contract, and the chief did outline his budget to the finance committee. So we have more information if you in the future have questions on specific line items. The Office of Emergency Management is next, and that is the same as last year. Next is the First Aid Organization, again, same as last year at $9,000. Next, we have the Fire Department. Any questions on that? It's looking at a $1,000 increase. They gave us some rationale for that, for their purchases of radio,
Budget things.
other things. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yes, that's right, because we did take out gasoline. Sorry about that. Yes, it is flat.
The entire town, for some reason.
Yes.
There's an accounting, James, and I see this all the time, as an accountant. Yeah, there was gas was separate on fire and fire only. I said, shouldn't it be all together, and we just made a quick change.
Right, right. And we didn't actually boost gas 1,000 because of it, since the gas prices have gone down so dramatically that we've reduced gas, as you can see. Next, we have the fire hydrants.
I just wanted to mention the total borough spend for its volunteer fire department is $63,000 for the entire year. So just to get that out there, it's pretty good.
Really good.
Absolutely. Okay. Hydrants down slightly.
Actually,
I'm
sorry,
sorry?
I think when you really look at what was spent, 59, I think that 57 kind of been underestimated. I think.
There might have been another bill that came in when I was creating that sheet.
Okay.
In January.
So you're saying 57,000 is
I think
inaccurate?
based on what was spent last year, and it hasn't gone down, it's really,
Plus, we reimbursed the point from that line item. Of course, remember you agreed to pay the
Correct.
margin several years ago?
Yes.
So we
Mhm.
pay it from that line item.
Okay, so does that mean that we need to increase it?
I would, to keep it flat, I would take the 1,700 that we just took out of that other line and put it in here.
So it's not the full two?
I mean, if
Okay.
you want,
No,
I
no,
think
no,
we
no.
should.
I like your suggestion. I'm moving on.
We did spend 59 last year, but
All right. Next, we have our fire page about the inspection end of the fire. That is where there's revenue to offset this page because they collect money for their fines, which we just increased the fine after it hadn't been for 10 years, right, Councilwoman?
I'm sorry?
We just
Oh,
increased
yeah, all
the
the
fee.
for all the food establishments, yes, all the fees went up.
Okay. And the other businesses too, I thought?
Yeah,
For
this
the
is
fire
for the
department.
Yeah, for the businesses, for the fire inspections.
Thanks, Councilman. So their fire inspections for all the commercial spaces in the borough. So their revenue has increased, and that's that. Next, we have municipal prosecutor. After that, we have the streets and roads budget. So right now, you can see that's broken out into salaries and wage and other expenses. The finance committee did shave 500 on a couple line items and a 100 from another one, so a total of $1,100 was just shaved from the other expenses budget. So if there's any questions on that, we can talk about that now, but then I would like to move into a conversation about the staffing level at the DPW, because that falls into salaries and wages. So any questions on the operating budget side of the DPW for streets and roads? No?
I do, actually.
Okay,
As
sure.
a comment that you made at the outset, you said that we saved $44,000. Does that include unemployment compensation for the terminated employee?
I was strictly
I was strictly referring to the particular line item for streets and road salaries and wages, and it's also something that relates back to the staffing level. If you want to discuss the unemployment, Ms. Bruns, feel free.
Well, that's not accounted for in here. That's a separate line item, which,
That's the answer to my question. So 44,000 gets diminished by any unemployment expenditure.
we haven't increased the unemployment line, so I'm not sure. I mean,
Well, the unemployment premiums will stay the same.
we had some, we usually fund it at about 15,000. We don't always need the full amount every year, so I didn't have to increase it to cover the situation you're referring to.
You did not. Okay, that's the answer to my question. Thank you.
And just to point out, so the salaries and wages right now for the DPW, it would be higher if the decision last year was not made. However, this does include right now the staffing of the department at 8. So the council has been brought up to speed about the history of that, and we're right now effective today. We had 8 men on the books for the DPW. So the question is, does the council wish to continue to stay at a staffing level of 8, or does it wish to go to 7? So I'll open this up actually to Councilman Petrozelli, since you're the Streets and Roads Chairman.
All right, thank you, Sarah. I mean, we did have a committee meeting on this, and it was 2-1 to leave it at 8 as it is right now. And this actually brings our department back up to the 8 laborers that we used to have before 2003. There has been increases as far as personnel in other departments, such as the police, to bring our police officers up to 16. They remain there at 3 years without that 16th officer, and I just think that this is the opportune time to restore the DPW to the 8 laborers that it should be, and it's something that I really feel that this needs to be done. And if it's budgeted properly, which it is, then I feel that it should remain at 8, and in this way, the borough services can only increase from there.
I think it should be 9, 7 full-time, 2 seasonal. That's the way I look at it. I think that's the way it was. That's the way it was intended to be. And from the beginning of the year, it was supposed to be 7 full-time. It's only changed recently. I think that it's important to include seasonal help, and we will be replacing full-time employees as they retire. We have a few on the short list that should be retiring in the next 18 months, and I think that number will be up to 7 and can stay that way for the foreseeable future. And I think that's what we should be, and just continually bring in seasonal help as we need it.
But that's how it was before.
How far ago? How long ago? What are we talking
We've
about?
always had 7 with 2 seasonal workers, but seasonal is not all year round. Seasonal is only when they need help.
Are you cutting the seasonal budget here by keeping the 8 full-time guy?
No, right now, seasonal can drop to 1 person, which is what, we were, discussing. And that line item would be $9,600 to have 1 seasonal person. So it's not that you would have 8 with no seasonal. We would have 8 with at least 1 seasonal person, to fill in. And that's primarily needed in the leaf season, towards the end of the year.
I mean, I just feel more comfortable, and I know we discussed this. I want to have just more comfortable having part-time people, future benefits down the road I don't want to get into. At this point in time, I don't think it's the best thing for the borough. We have to be cost-effective about it while keeping the same manpower, and that's why I still think it should be 7 and 2, not 8 and 1.
Well, maybe what we can do is ask Clint what his opinion would be on how he would like to have the department run.
Well, we did have that discussion. I think he does feel that 8 would be something that would be beneficial as far as bringing it back up to 8, because there are episodes that do happen. Like right now, there is 1 person out because of work accomplishing. So, you have certain things that do happen, and I think that we really need to restore this back up to the 8 persons that it was, prior to 2003.
Right, back to 2003. Okay, I just have a question before we even get to that. I'm a little, and forgive me, Councilman Song, you know this far better than I do. And I'm just trying to get the counting down. When we had the old DPW superintendent, how many people worked at the DPW? Total.
There were 7 full-time laborers and 1 full-time superintendent.
So, okay. We then went to
Unless you're asking
7.
Councilman Sarno, sorry if I
No,
answered your
just
question for
whoever's
you.
got it, whoever's got it.
Okay.
So we got 7, then after that, we have 7 full-time laborers, 1 part-time administrative DPW superintendent, okay. And now we're gonna have 8 laborers plus the administrator, so it's 8 plus the part-time. That's the proposal?
Mhm.
Part-time as far as what, as far as seasonal?
No, part-time as far as the
Superintendent.
DPW superintendent, okay. And I just, okay, so now that I understand, it's 8 plus, so to my mind, that's 8 plus 1 administrative, 1 part-time administrator. So yeah, seasonal, I'm not even gonna get into.
Okay.
When did the need arise, and how was the decision arrived at? Maybe you could just walk me through, Council President Petrozelli, that we needed an 8th person. When did that manpower need arise, and when did we decide to fill that?
I think that the need has been around ever since 2003, when there was 1 full-time person taken away from the actual department to bring in a superintendent. Me personally, I would rather pay money for the laborer, because those are the people who are actually physically doing your job and getting things done in the town. So it was in 2003, I think, is when the need happened, when that 1 person was taken away.
So somehow we muddled along for 12 years.
Right. 13.
But yeah, now 13 years. So that's interesting. Okay, so this was just something sitting on the back burner with 12. And when did we hire that 8th person?
Just recently.
Just that reorganization?
Okay, but that wasn't 8 at the time, right?
No.
How many was it at the time?
At the time, that made the department 7.
Okay, so I don't understand how we got the 8th person.
Well, Councilman, you should understand, since we've discussed this in executive session,
Maybe you want to explain to the public how we came to 8 people.
we don't have our borough attorney here tonight. I don't know, Ms. Ariema, I don't want to step out of line with what I'm saying, so.
I don't think we should, yeah, I don't think we should be stepping into the word that we don't know anything about.
How about I ask a question? What is the difference in Mr. Sarno's proposal and the other proposal? What is the difference money-wise?
Money-wise, sure. I can speak to this on the financial end. So basically, let me see what I have here. Right now, as the department stands with 8 full-time laborers, there's still a savings over previous when you had 7 laborers and a full-time superintendent. There's a savings on the salary side and also on the health benefits side and down the road on the pension side. So including the fact that there is a payment made for the shared service agreement, we would still be saving $28,000. So
No, well, the other things are
That's-
applicable, right? We're not going back to what's to before.
About 30,000 on
So we'd be saying
That's
30.
for what I'm thinking.
Right, so, and that would, that, basically the seasonal, there's no benefits involved, or none of this, correct? So it's $30,000 we're talking about here.
correct, but I would also caution the council not to discriminate against employment about the health insurance too much. Just, we should be a little bit careful.
I don't think anyone's discriminated.
No, I mean, the
That's
thing is,
a harsh term to use.
here's the
I just
thing.
want us to be careful.
No, I understand, I'm also,
And I understand your point too, Councilman.
yeah, because we hired another one based on circumstances from the other one, so we wouldn't have done that if circumstances didn't change. Am I correct?
I think I was lost somewhere there, but,
The new hire pretty much was done because of a
right,
replacement.
correct.
So if, well, all right, doesn't matter, all right, third grade, okay.
And if I could just make one point, and again, and I apologize, because there are real people here with real things on the line, and I'm not insensitive to that, all right? But again, we serve all the people here, so you're a human being and should be treated as such. What I'm here to say is, taking the council president, excuse me, do you have something to say?
I
I said thank you.
Point of order?
I said thank you.
Is she allowed to just? Yeah, okay. What'd you say?
So thank you.
No, I think she said something up
Please
there.
don't address me.
All right.
I'd rather you just don't address
That's
me.
enough, no back and forth.
So if I could just address without any comments. Taking the council president at his word, that this is a 12-year need that we've just now decided that we have to address in a year of an $185 per household tax increase. Let me suggest this is not the year to do a 12-year need. We muddled through for 12 years. On other years, hey, there are things around my house that haven't been done, and forgive me if I'm keeping anyone, but I haven't been done for 12 years. When we got money, we do them. We put it off another 12 years if we don't have the money, and I think that might be the case here. So I appreciate that the Streets and Roads Committee did analyze this pressing 12-year need, but I don't think that 2016 is the year to address it. That's my opinion.
I disagree.
I would just also like to say about this 12-year need, look at the borough in the past 12 years. We've certainly grown. Our infrastructure is greater. Our development is greater. The workload on the DPW has certainly increased, and the staffing has never been increased to restore it back to where it was prior to 2003. So,
We also have the athletic complex as a major contributor to the extra work.
well, that is part of the infrastructure, but I wouldn't say it's the main reason. I would say adding development with increasing time for garbage would be of a greater degree. But regardless, the infrastructure and development of the town has increased. This need has existed. I know that in past, I've heard talk that they would like to have, and this was from the administration, they would like to have more and go back to 8, but the request was never formally made to the council. So now the Streets and Roads Committee has discussed this. There's pros and cons, obviously, and my inclination is that with seeing that this year it could be done still at a savings over last year, I'm inclined to say this would be the time to do it.
Mayor, can I just ask you, you sounded like it may come down to your vote on this one. What's your
Well,
opinion?
to be honest, right now, when I go through the whole budget, I will have an opinion.
So as of right now, you don't have an opinion. One question to you, Mayor, and to the other Council President Petrozelli, Councilperson Tedisco, Councilman Martin. At the time that the former DPW president was terminated, did we know about the need for an 8th man?
It was never requested, so
But did
it
we?
was taken the same way it's been taken for 12 years.
I knew historically that we had been at 8 and we're down to 7.
Because that's just, I don't think that was ever discussed.
No, it was never requested.
There was a-
It wasn't requested, it was mentioned, because that's how
We mentioned that during the termination of the DPW.
I believe so, because we talked about why we were doing it. That was part of the discussion.
If you could point to that, those discussions in the minutes or any tapes,
Okay.
because I simply do not recall that.
Okay.
So, because what I'm trying to get at is sometime between July 14th and today, that 12-year need was addressed, and I'm just trying to figure out when that need was dealt with. Thank you.
We can move on to the next page, public buildings and grounds. All right. Any questions on this page? Again, the Finance Committee did make a couple shavings here, 500 from one line, 500 from another, off of what was initially requested. Next, we have the Sports and Recreation Complex page. You can see that it is down slightly from what was adopted last year. So now that we've had that complex for a year, and we've separated out the expense for that, as previously for the Little League field and that area in town, that was part of the buildings and grounds budget, that was separated out and added to for the Sports and Recreation Complex. So.
Is there any way we can offset the 19,000?
Sandy, do you want to speak just to the revenue side from the recreation complex? Because there are a couple areas we receive revenue from, rentals as well as summer recreation, but they are separate. Yes, but if, the revenue side.
You have and the administrator can explain it probably better than I can, that the Green Acres legislation legislation says that revenue that's generated by that complex can only be used for capital improvements and maintenance of the complex. We do have that money in a separate account, and it probably has a significant amount in it that you could probably use to offset some of this budget.
That would be great.
That's a good idea.
Because that was the theory, it was always gonna be a self-sustaining field. So how much money do we have in the account?
I think it's about 20,000.
That's what- And again, it's just, I mean,
Yeah, just
I know you don't
off the
listen
top of my
yet.
head. We
So
have
about
that.
20,000, we could basically like to slide item out.
Yeah,
That would
you
be
can
a
knock
great
it out.
idea. Mayor, would you be in favor of that? I'll go with the mayor on board.
Yay.
We
So-
can zero this out.
It's good.
I'm
I
in.
don't know, but.
Wait. I just want to point out, you go ahead, Mayor.
Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I would just like to point out, so the idea is to have that trust account for maintenance of the complex. Since there has been 20,000, anyway, since there has been 20,000 in that account, I caution zeroing that right down, because then that does not leave for expenses out over and above the year-to-year maintenance that we have in the budget. So maybe, I don't know if the auditors would like to speak to this at all, since it would be a revenue and a expense side.
I don't know what revenue you're talking
They have fees that people that rent the new athletic complex pay, like soccer. It's not residents, it's like organizations that are using the field, and that money is in a specific trust account that maybe you could explain the
As we have Green Acres funding for the project, the fees that are collected have to go in dedicated trust. It can be used to offset capital and maintenance expenses for the complex. That's Green Acres regulations, which we have to comply with if we accept the Green Acres money to build it. So we set up the account when we open the complex, and every fee that's collected has been put in that trust account. And that's what the money has to be used for. You could leave it sit there for capital expense, if you're gonna do something, but you can also use it to operate budget for the complex.
about. Sandy, you have a dedication by right?
It wasn't specific to that, but we do have one for recreation, so do I need to apply?
I'm not familiar with what's going on.
I didn't know, I thought that was separate, other because of the community. Yeah.
Would that only be on a separate line item, on a separate page?
Well, no, if it's a trust, then you're spending it out of trust. It doesn't
Okay,
go in the budget.
just wanted to clarify that.
But this was the goal. This was the goal of it, to rent out the complex and how that it pays for itself. So this is a wonderful thing.
It is.
And money's
Oh,
already
it
there,
is.
so then as it goes through, like let's say we get to the summer, that's gonna be replenished anyway, Sarah. So I think your concern, I think, would be addressed. I really do.
I agree, but you're zeroing it out after 1 year. I would like to maybe compromise on this. I would be in favor of maybe half or even 5,000 in the budget still. At least leave some money in the trust for maintenance of it as time goes on.
Well, I mean, let's also think too that, you know, your warranty periods are over when the contractor built it. So anything that does happen down there, you know, you're gonna have to have some type of money that would pay for that. Now, I think that would come out of here. I think the great thing is that, you know, we only had the complex open for 1 year, kind of figuring it all out, and look what it did. So, you know, we have this year as well. But I don't think that we should zero something out, because you do have things that could actually potentially happen down there that are not on warranty anymore.
And I,
Are warranties covered with these funds? Isn't that something separate? With warranties, or could you use the funds for warrants for,
Well, this was through the contractor. You got a 1-year warranty
Right.
on labor and interiors. The field itself has an 8-year warranty,
Right.
but, you know, the building itself, you are off of any warranties that you had.
And the lights have a longer warranty, right?
Yeah, it's 25 years.
Okay. And so would we really be even zeroing this out or reducing this budget, or we would just be anticipating revenue?
Zero it out, so we can charge the trust.
Sandy, you
account,
know
right?
exactly how much money you have though, before you zero it out, you better
I
make
want to
sure.
confirm that, yeah.
Okay.
So,
All right. But I would like to leave 5,000 in the budget personally, but other thoughts are welcome.
We just collected about $12,000 for the field, just.
Oh, really? For
last
this
week.
year?
Yes.
She's included the number she said.
Oh,
So it's not addition to what she said. It's included in what she said. So it wasn't all collected in 1 year, is all I'm trying to say.
Well, you can offset every other year, too. You could build it up again, do something along those lines as money comes in. Is that a fair idea?
Okay, that's a good idea. Can we check on the exact number and decide with a final number next week? Would everybody be okay with that?
That's the best thing you have, that's a full tax one. That's one full tax one.
Take it down. The question is, do we want to take it down a little tonight and then revisit it again next week, or just save it all for next week?
Just save it all in one
Okay,
shot.
we'll just do it one shot then.
Okay.
But we'll keep that in the back of our mind when we hear the final number from these guys.
I think Councilman Sarno
It's
has a
all over
good
the
idea.
place here.
Okay.
That was good. That was good.
Our next page is the Shade Tree Commission, so we brought this down drastically. Let's see, I have my old budget copy on this one. We are at, what are we at on this one? We're at
I think we cut it back to 10,000, right?
10,000, we cut 18?
It's not this-
I wrote it down in my budget speech, but let me check.
6,500.
Yep. 16.
Further from this?
No, what it's stated here is minus 16,500.
Okay.
You do the math. I tried to do the
So
math.
so right now, this shade tree line has been left at 12,000 total, which is a $16,500 reduction from last year. Does anyone wish to ask questions or cut it back further? This is, go
I
ahead.
have a question. Other towns do this on a volunteer basis. Is there any way Garwood can do that?
What portion, I'm sorry, what portion?
Yeah, what was it
I
at?
assume this is,
Yeah, the $4,000, the commissions. The Shade Tree Commission?
Correct, the payroll
Right.
is what you're referring to, right?
Right. I mean, I'm just asking. I mean, I know other towns do it. Is that something that Garwood ever
administrative fee we
consider?
use from the office?
Sorry?
Is that the administration fee we use when we go out to bids and everything? Is that?
Salary is a salary, and then the rest is for maintenance when we have to do
That
physical
Rich's
work.
tree service come in?
Yes,
Is that-
but the reason why it was okay to cut it back is we did more meetings last year, and you spent a lot of money, got a
Yes.
lot of trees, so got a lot of it caught up.
Yeah.
So don't anticipate having to spend that much this year on maintenance.
Right. Right now, our maintenance line is 8,000.
I think you can get by this year with that, no problem.
With 8, no problem? Okay. Do you
You
think
might
we
have to
can?
jump it up next year, but worry
Okay.
about next year.
Okay. I agree. All right, next we have health and welfare. This is the Board of Health and the contract with the Westfield Regional Health Department. So set by contract, and then there's the salary with that. Next, we have animal control. After that, recreation. Any questions on recreation? We did, as a finance committee, also make some adjustments here from what was requested.
So, let me get this straight. The finance committee added $4,000, approximately, a little more, over what was requested by the actual Board of Recreation.
Okay, well, I'm glad you asked that question because Ms. Bruns has the answer. We also have a revenue side.
At one of the budget meetings, we were discussing the way we've been accounting for this, and we are putting a new revenue in the budget this year to anticipate the summer rec fees that are being collected, rather than the way we were doing it in the past, collecting them, holding them, and then kind of refunding the line item, because it wasn't fully funded, because we knew we were gonna, there was charges to participate in the program. So it's kind of a wash. We're anticipating 7,000 in revenue, but we bumped up the field trip line to fully fund it. Now, it's up to you whether you want to fund it at that level. That was just what's been done for now.
What's the revenue, how much are you talking about?
It's
Roughly.
about 7,000 that was collected last year.
About 7,000.
Yes. I did ask that department to confirm that number. I haven't heard back from them. I wanted to know how many kids participated last year and what their fee schedule is
Right, and I remember the number, either 7,200 or 7,600 was actually collected, so it's slightly less, just to be a little on the safe side, but I think what you're doing to check on that is great. Okay, next we have the senior citizen page, and the grant was cut again.
Oh, boy, too much.
Right,
By $450.
450.
Yeah, you mentioned that, Mayor.
That's correct.
um,
But that was across the board, it was not unique to Garwood.
Yeah, isn't that sad?
Yes, we have to realize, I sit on that committee, as I mentioned, and you can sit there and you can literally pass out checks to all the organizations, that's how good they are. So there is need there, and it does warrant some money's given to them.
Is there any way that we can like do more for that? I mean, it seems like I said, I
If
have
you do more, you have to spend more.
Huh?
Yeah, if you want to do more, you have to spend more.
and,
You can have a box if you want, as an example, if you want to create something for the village of Garwood, you have to give them a proposal, just say $10,000. If you only got 2,000, you'd have to put up the 8,000. So that's the trade-off.
and also too, I have a question and then a follow-up to this discussion. Ms. Ariama, I have a note that the grant was cut 1,000, or was that before we really knew, as the mayor said, 450?
Yeah, we didn't know until.
Oh, okay, that was, his number was the final number then. But what we did was, we did increase the program/seniors line from 2,000 last year to 3,000 this year to make sure that we supplemented that cut by the grant. So if everyone's okay with that, I would certainly like to leave that in.
Yeah, because it's been going down every year. It seems to me like the
It went
most
down
vulnerable.
1,500 last year.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why generally the borough subsidizes when those grants get cut. Okay, next page is the public library. This is set by a percentage dictated by the state. The only real area of control that the council has is on in-kind fees to the borough. So basically, the borough takes care of the insurance, the paperwork processing, the bill processing type of thing for the library. And this comes at a cost to the borough. So to make it a wash, based on the cost, they went up this year. Last year they were 49,000. This year they were 51. So we did increase the revenue for the in-kind up 2,000. And I know we've talked about this in the past, saying, you know, we don't want to strap the library. Of course, they provide great services to the residents, but the library is in good shape. When we met with the library, they really are in sound financial shape. And so by increasing this, it's not going to decrease services. It's just making sure that the borough isn't supplementing the library at this point. It's just an even wash. However, of course, who knows what 20 years brings or 10 years brings. Other towns are facing the question as to whether or not to supplement their libraries. Right now, the Finance Committee did not feel like we were anywhere near that point. The library's in good shape, and we can anticipate this $2,000. Next page is retirement and sick benefits. And this is to anticipate a, can I say the specific position, Ms. Ariama? Of what the retirement and sick benefits is for in possibly 2017? Or what department at least, or no?
Oh, I wouldn't mention names, but.
No, not-
Anticipation of a top retirement.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
That's what you mean, right?
What's that?
I think that's what you mean.
Yes, that is what I mean. Thank you for saying what's appropriate. So, okay.
Did you mean to say 2017 or you meant to say 2016?
No, I meant to say retirement in 2017.
Okay, so this is for an anticipation of the
Right.
next package.
So this line is really here so that the borough can build up a fund that when retirements happen, especially some of the more expensive payouts, we would not have to do a bond ordinance in order to pay that person per their contract that they're required to get this payout. However, what we have in that account right now is so low, and that potential payout is so much greater that we would really only have the choice at that time to either increase the operating budget, probably $50,000 or more dollars, which is about $25 hit to each home, or go out for a bond. So personally, knowing that this year is tough and knowing that situation, I'm thinking about it today, you know, where can we cut a little more? I would personally like to maybe take this down to 5 and save half the tax point. So, whatever the rest of the council thinks, I'd love to hear it.
Do we know how much we're going to spend in 017 by any chance?
That's possibly 70, right? 60, 70?
Rough?
Preliminary, yeah, maybe 65, I'm not sure how close that is, but
65 thousand?
65,000.
Thousand?
Yes,
And you want to take this down to 5,000?
because if it's left at 15, it's still not going to put us anywhere near the ability to pay it cash.
But I still don't, then, you know, it's like saying you can't make your mortgage so look like your credit card. I don't want to do that. I don't know about you guys.
Well, I mean,
I would
you're
say-
entitled to that. I mean, it can still keep getting built up, and in that year, if there's not enough money, then you might be closer to the 65, so then you'll increase taxes in that year to reach that 65 mark.
We have
Totally worth it.
Okay.
fun.
Coming no matter what.
Oh, that's true.
Watch out for that train.
This is what it is.
All right, we'll leave it.
Thank you.
Next, we have the Celebration of Public Events Committee. In their budget, it did go up, but that's because some money was personally donated in the past, and it's really not right to budget based on personal donations and personal things like that. So basically, the Celebrations Committee did a great job itemizing out what they plan to do this year, how much it would cost, and that's where we get the $3,335. Also, the Historical Committee, which has existed for quite a while now, but is quite active, as we've mentioned at council meetings, with this big rededication of the recreation complex coming up in June, with a proposed, well, their plan is to put a plaque on the main building of that complex in honor of Mayor Concoli, and that plaque, you know, comes at a pretty decent price tag. You know, it's a nice plaque that they want there, and also to have that event and to start having some funds to make sure that Garwood's history is preserved by putting things online and so forth. They requested $2,500 from the committee. This is another area we were split 2-1. So I'd like the sentiments of other council.
I think they should do fundraisers.
And
You know, and believe me, nobody wants to preserve the history of Garwood more than me, but.
I don't know, I'll take that competition, but anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, but it's a matter of some things out there, you know, it's warrants a fundraiser. It gets everybody involved, it gets them excited, and, you know, everybody doesn't have to, everything doesn't have to always be accounted for.
And once you
But
put,
look,
oh, sorry.
but you want to think about it? So you know, it's just, you know. No, so it's just a matter of, that's the way I feel about it. I think a lot of things, if we took community, again, the way it used to be, where charity and giving really came from your heart and individuals' pockets, I think it goes a long way towards more goodwill in the town amongst everybody.
And they have done fundraisers, they've sold those plaques on the picture frame, so they have collected money from that. They plan for future fundraisers. They plan to sell t-shirts at this rededication and so forth, and maybe a booklet or something like that. There's fundraisers in the works for that committee. I would just like to make sure that they get something to make sure that that plaque and that event is covered. It's just their first year asking for the $2,500. Perhaps we don't have to give the full $2,500. I'd feel comfortable advocating for $2,000, but I would like to advocate for something and not just say that this borough committee should completely fundraise. Celebrations committee, for example, does not completely fundraise. I think the two are parallel.
Maybe they should both be fundraising then. Should we go back to that? I'll go back to that one too.
If you want to, I mean, you're entitled to.
You know.
I mean, once you make one line item, it's not going to go away, and that's what kills me on this. I don't want to start something like that. I would definitely help out in any fundraising effort, whatever it may be. And once you start a line item like that, I don't think the taxpayer should be on the hook for something like that to start with. That's just my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, I mean, totally. Like I said, it really brings forth a sense of community too. Everybody, I'll buy t-shirts, I'll sell t-shirts, I'll do whatever. I'll bake cookies, I'll do stuff. I can, you know, there's plenty. Everybody can chip in.
Yes, that's second me on that one, I go third me on that one, I think that's definitely right. The line item, what they say, closest you come to eternal life in this earth is a government program. So I really don't want to see this get put in there, because whether it's $2,000 or $20, it ain't going away. How much is that gonna cost?
Believe it's around, it was 1,500, but we got it lower, right, 900 maybe?
For what?
The plaque for Concoli,
1,000.
1,000, okay. Well, it should last too. I mean, to go cheap on something like that, I think is not appropriate either. But with that said, Councilman Martin, how do you feel about this? Mayor, how do you feel about this? It seems like we're fairly split.
After I give my opinion, I probably shouldn't go home, because my wife is on the committee. But I would take the middle of the road, I would say 1,500, at least to pay for the plaque and have some refreshments at the event that you planned in June.
Councilman Martin?
I understand what, Councilman Sarno and others are saying about this, it's a line item, but we're not talking, I mean, yeah, maybe we make it sort of like a matching grant. Maybe we give them a little bit of money and then have them raise the rest of it or something. It doesn't have to be a lot of money. How about give them $500 or something?
We just got Hartman donated at the last council meeting. I mean, that's the same model I want to follow. We get one plaque donated. Can we come together and do that? I mean, I just thought of that. That's why I brought it up. Sorry to go again.
No, you're absolutely right. That's from Stanley.
Right. And
I
that,
live here.
and that is very nice, but I personally wouldn't want to approach the Concoli family and say, we want to dedicate this building, and hey, by the way, if you want to dedicate it to you, pay for the plaque. I mean, that's just.
No, approach us. Approach us.
Sure. Well,
I mean, again, not to
Go ahead.
belabor the point there, is just that, for me, Mayor, it's irrelevant whether it's 500, 1,500, 2,000. Once you got it, you're stuck with it forever. So my whole thing is, I don't want the line item, and I will be very active, and you can hold me to that in fundraising for this and donating to this. I don't want this line item put on the taxpayers, please.
I'm happy to help.
If you're very objective to it, you could probably charge the plaque other expenses in buildings and grounds and not do this line item just to get that plaque.
And I'm the chairman of Buildings and Grounds, and I support that. Excellent recommendation.
Okay, I'll support that
Excellent
also.
recommendation.
At least they got a good start.
all right, let's keep it going. So the next page.
So we kind of want to take it out then? Is that what you're going to do? You're going to vote to take it out?
And what a pay for the plaque.
I'm still in favor of something in that line.
I mean, add this line item into the.
Oh, add it to buildings and grounds? I think that would be appropriate because the buildings and grounds budget is already being used for other things and tapped, and it's one of those budgets that's less predictable than others, buildings and grounds, so.
All right.
Could we move 1,000 to buildings and grounds then and take 1,500, and take all 2,500 out of historical, move 1,000 into buildings and grounds, and save 1,500? Do we agree to that?
I think it's a good idea.
I'd do that because it doesn't create another line item.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I think it's a good compromise.
Done.
Okay, did you guys get that?
Yep.
Perfect. Next, we have the salary adjustment. This is where a lump sum is placed for a later discussion on raises for non-union employees. And right now, that's where the Finance Committee felt it appropriate to budget for now, but perhaps we can have that conversation next week, since everyone received the spreadsheet on what different percentages look for the non-union employees.
Can I get
Could
a
we
sub
discuss
total on
that?
that? On that sheet?
I'm
The
sorry?
sheet that you presented out with all the salary increases, can I get like a total at the end?
Oh,
At the far right?
I calculated that. I mean, I didn't
Just send it
create
to
a new
me.
spreadsheet or anything, but, I didn't total it out. It was 6,800, I think, 6,800, and then there was some part-time hourly
You want
there.
sending it to me?
So- Yes, I can send it around.
Thank you.
Sure.
Send it around.
I'll send it to everybody, no problem. I'm not a math teacher, but I can still do the math. Next, we have the tax appeals pending. This was requested to us by our attorney. The tax appeals that we discussed earlier in the meeting is jumping from 20 to 50 this year. So we can discuss that more next week as well with the tax assessor. Next page is utilities, street lighting, gas. You can see we are saving quite a bit of money on gas now that it's cheaper. Right now, the budget is $45,000 for that. Any thoughts on this budget?
It could be in the 30s, but I don't know if I'm comfortable in moving it. That's the thing. So that'd be a good thing. That's all.
What would be your reasoning about moving it to?
I'm not moving it. I said it could very well be in the 30s,
Oh, you.
which would be a benefit
Oh, yeah, yeah.
going forward. That's all, I'm just pointing that out.
Right.
As of today, guess when it's going back up again?
Really?
Yes.
No, a lot.
Thankfully, it's down from the same time a year ago,
Right.
thankfully, which is a good thing.
Right.
Valid point.
Okay, seems like we're comfortable there.
It's all a rate system.
Next, we have the sewer system. This is the RVSA, that's set. Sanitation landfill, this is basically set as well. Contingent was requested at 2,000, we brought it down to 1,000, which is where it was last year.
And what's that for?
That is for items that, contingencies, things that come up that you don't expect and it can be charged there, so it has happened. Mhm. Okay, next page, this is calculated out for us, statutory expenditures, social security, the police and fire retirement that I talked about earlier. Next page, length of service award program, LoSAP, that's calculated out for us based on who had reached LoSAP. The grants page, that's all set. We have the municipal court page next.
Just a
Sure.
clarification on the grants, is that the money's coming in?
Awards that we know about. for the
Yes.
year.
Thank you.
Okay, so municipal court, we did scale back that budget, and then the court administrator came back with some thoughts on that, so we kind of met in the middle. And then the final page here is the page on our borough debt and payments accordingly. So we do have a bit of a decrease here, as I mentioned in my budget speech, and that's all I have. If anybody else has anything, feel free.
Any general comments at this point from the council? Good start. Thank you.
Is debt servicing still the same? Like 315?
Maybe, yeah, maybe
Is that
it
right?
I'm sorry?
Debt servicing is at 315 in total?
I'm sorry, 315.
Is that about right? For the borough, on the community side, obviously.
Do you have that?
Final page, I'm not sure what your question is.
The total debt is $325,000.
Okay, 320.
325?
Thank you.
Of course, okay.
Yeah, close. Alrighty. Mayor, public comment? All right.
Any more final comments from the council? Hearing none? Is anyone in the audience who wishes to address the mayor and council, please step to the microphone and state your full name and address. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Not bad. Yeah, go for it. You may be able to get on the train.
Well, there's no microphone, but Bruce Patterson, 325 Willow Avenue. Thank you very much for inviting the public for the hearing. How sausages are made is always interesting. It was interesting. I guess the 185, annual increase, that comes out to about $350,000.
Well, it's 165 now.
165 comes out to about $320,000.
It's still 184, man.
184, where's the 20 then we talked about?
The average increase is 184.
Okay.
Well, we still have to find out about the planning board. That's significant money in there.
We offset it, and we didn't talk about we held off for another week on the
Right.
athletic field, that's
Right.
the first part. And the second
Okay.
part is the planning board, which is to be discussed later.
I mean, these are all rough numbers, obviously, because, not even introducing the budget yet, but that's an overall increase of about 320,000 overall?
It depends, the revenues is down.
342.
Okay, 340,000. All right, and just about the historical committee, which I'm the president of, and I hate going to the till. I mean, I don't like increasing taxes, but I mean, it actually came out of an unfortunate incident where the Centennial Committee, in conjunction with the Historical Committee, the Centennial Committee was going to fund our event, and somehow there's a legal glitch, so that fell through, that funding, and that's why we actually came in front of the Finance Committee. It's not that we were planning to do that. It was a sudden thing, And, I mean, it was disconcerting listening to, you know, fundraisers are great. I mean, we are planning fundraisers, as Councilwoman Tedesco talked about. You know, the issue that we are facing is that this event is June, and it's really tough to fundraise to get enough money in the next 3 months. I mean, we do have money in escrow at this point. We are planning additional revenue before that, but, you know, we are at an impasse that, you know, there are costs very soon coming up, and we do appreciate the $1,000, right? Is that what the historical thing? And I think the $1,000 plus whatever money we have in escrow and maybe the money coming in from other revenue sources should cover it. So, you know, at this point, if you're gonna let 1,000, I can't speak for the committee, I gotta bring this back to the committee, but, you know, I think we can feel comfortable. Yeah, so much for that, right, right, Mayor?
Don't call my house.
Don't go home, you know? But anyway, but I appreciate it, at least the discussion that you had on it. And I do understand fundraisers, and we will be moving forward with it. One fundraiser you didn't mention was a calendar. So I don't know when, but we will be coming out with a calendar with historical pictures of Garwood in it. So I'm sure that's something that everybody would be interested in. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Step forward, please.
Glenn Lewis, 451 Fair Avenue. Question, sorry, you had said it pertains to the staffing of the Public Works Department, that with an 8th man, you're saving money
Correct, over last year.
over last year. Due to the fact that you have a shared service
Correct.
with Fanwood now, we have a part-time superintendent. And it's still in question whether to add the 8th man, am I understanding that right? With the cost saving, you're adding a man to the department, but we still have a problem